Upper Echelon is brought to you by Deloitte. For innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning, turn to Deloitte. In studio today is Kevin de Villiers. He is the CEO of Arcay. Kevin, the company is 20 years old today, or this year. How does it feel to be involved with, your own business for 20 years?
I think it's been very exciting, continues to be exciting, and we like the direction it's going in.
Yeah, absolutely. There are not many companies. There have been a lot of research recently that shows a lot of small companies, don't make it to become big.
I think that's so. Obviously, the small medium is the more dangerous area of business. It's also the area from which the future great companies come. But no doubt at all, it's risky. It's like sailing a smaller yacht across the ocean rather than a big ocean liner. We're very happy, though, with the volumes of business and where things are going.
But before that, you've been with Barclays Bank for quite a while, and that relationship started in 1976.
Actually, earlier than that, I left school to go to Barclays. I left them to study full-time, and then I rejoined Barclays. And from there, I spent time in South Africa and then 3 years in the United States.
Okay, but let's start. Where did you grow up?
Graaff-Reinet.
Graaff-Reinet, so from the Eastern Cape.
Yes, correct.
And from there, how did you studied at Wits? How did you get to Wits?
Well, I did things back to front. I went to work straight after school, so I went into banking, and I did what I'd call the normal banking apprenticeship over 5 or 6 years. I tried to study part-time, and I was moderately successful, but at some stage I figured it'll take me a long time to get degrees. So I actually retired at the age of 21, stopped working for 2 years and ran off about 3 degrees in parallel.
Can you tell us more about that? Why did you take that decision? It's quite an interesting one.
I think I eventually decided that in the long run, degrees would be useful and valuable. And what was happening is I was advancing too rapidly. So what was actually I was being put into difficult situations. If there was a problem somewhere administratively, I was sent there to solve it. And, typically when you're solving problems, you don't have the luxury of 8-hour days and, 4 hours to study in the evening. So I was running into long hours, 12, 14-hour type days. And once I was through with one assignment, I was given another assignment. I was given a pat on the back, a promotion, a bit more money, and I was on to the next assignment. So I figured, well, this is good. It's going very well. But looking forward over 10 years, I figured out I wouldn't actually finish off my qualifications.
And then you spent also some time in the US. How did that come about?
Well, I returned to Barclays. I worked there for another 2.5 or 3 years, and they had a program, a very good program in its day, of giving what they considered promising officials international experience, international banking experience. So I was attached to the New York office for 3 years.
When you came back, you also headed up Allied Bank prior to the amalgamation with Absa.
Correct.
How did that come about?
Well, of course, it was 2 steps. I came back to South Africa, continued to work for Barclays, got further promotions, etc. And then an opportunity came along where the building societies were being demutualized, turned into banks. And together with other people, we worked out that Allied, what was then the Allied Building Society, by acting intelligently and attracting a good, strong team very quickly, could steal a march on all the other building societies and convert to banking quicker than they could.
And the amalgamation, how did you perceive the actual transaction where those 4 institutions were put together?
Well, obviously, given my vantage point, I perceived it negatively. Because the Allied was doing well. It was building up capital, building up profit, building up a very good rapport with clients. It was gaining market share. But I think at some point it became too attractive to other groupings. And the building societies, of course, didn't in those days have a proper control structure of any kind. They simply had thousands of shareholders, and most of whom were the kind of archetype little old lady. So you had tens of thousands of little shareholders with little control.
Why did you not stay on, post the amalgamation?
I think the bottom line on that is an attempt was made. I think that the history books will show that an attempt was made to acquire the Allied at a very low price, at what I would have thought was a steal. You can put a zero on the back of it for today's money, but there was an attempt made to acquire it for 350 million, probably 3.5 billion in today's money. And by the time we were through with the defences and the processes, the price had gone all the way up to 850 million or 8.5 billion probably in today's money. Suffice it to say, that didn't make me popular with the acquirers. So my life was limited at that point, my life in what was then APSA. So I stayed on. I did my best to stay on and be a diplomat, but that didn't work, and 6 months later I left.
Mm. Then you started Arcay. How did you, decide, listen, I want to do my own thing? I'm sure, a lot of other banking jobs, were open to you. Why did you start your own business?
Well, I thought I could do a good job in it. I must say, in hindsight, it's not that I did a good job. I think we did a very good job. But the difficulties of working as an entrepreneur and a new businessman are much greater than the difficulties of working as a big corporate executive. And I'm glad I took the decision. I'm glad I went that way. And certainly my respect for entrepreneurs and businessmen went up enormously as a result of my finding out how difficult it is actually to go into business and survive.
One of the areas of your focus is to help Altex-listed companies, succeed as a sponsor. How do you find the Altex exchange? Do you think it's beneficial to the economy?
Yes, I think so. Our mandate's broader than that. Well over 2/3 of our clients aren't even listed on any exchange. Our focus is on entrepreneurs, owner-driven businesses, not exclusively. We've got, many larger clients who work on a different basis, but we've got a particular focus on entrepreneurs. And for many entrepreneurs, the best first exchange is Altex. And yes, we've taken a lot of companies onto Altex.
There's been a lot of research done showing that, small businesses really don't succeed. I read somewhere that from the number of businesses in South Africa in 1972, around about 18 or 20 still remain today. Do you see it's really difficult for a small business to survive here?
I think it's difficult. The challenges of going into business for yourself and succeeding are very, very high. But of course, every large business today started somewhere in a garage. So small businesses become big businesses. I would say the climate in the last 10 years has been particularly difficult. There was a major crack in the markets in 1999 to 2002. I think another crack in 2008. And it's almost like a storm at sea. In a storm at sea, the smaller yachts, even though they might be more skillfully navigated, are in far more danger than the big ships, which can be big plodding ships that haven't been well maintained for a while. But bigness helps you in turbulent times. And I think the last 10, 12 years in the world have been turbulent, and I think very difficult for entrepreneurs. Nevertheless, nothing ever changes. The future is always with entrepreneurs, even though there's a high attrition rate.
But working with these businesses, what do you think local entrepreneurs are doing wrong? If you compare it to developed countries or some developing countries, they seem to get more businesses, lasting longer, creating more jobs, and not being as more successful than the local guys.
I'd like to see statistics on that, because intuitively I don't think that's the case. We've probably got today about 150, 160 clients, of which about 30 are listed. And they're succeeding. There's been, if I just take our sample, and let's say of 150, we've had a death toll as well. And I think the death toll would be about 15 to 20. But 130 have succeeded. They're battling on. They're making money. And about 7 or 8 of the clients on our list of 150 have become large and prosperous. And, people who were, battling to make ends meet have now got net asset values of 50, 150, 200 million, and we've got a couple that are way past the billion mark. So we're not necessarily a sample, although I think we'd be representative. So I would say out of our 150, as I say, 20 died, 5 to 30 have succeeded in extraordinary ways. It's all relative. If your starting point is 50, then 50 million, then 1.5 billion is a lot. If your starting point was 80 million, your ending point is 90 million, well, that's not much progress. But we've seen a lot of progress in our client base.
But so, there's definitely a perception that South African businesses, struggle to survive. There's little government support. There's a lot of, a lack of management and accounting, training among. Do you think is that an international phenomenon?
I think it is. I think a high priority of government should be to make it easier for businessmen to start businesses and succeed. I don't think South Africa is the worst on that scorecard by any means, but it's certainly not as good as America. I'd rather start a business in America than in South Africa if I was American and, I knew the environment and I knew what I was doing. But I think South Africa ranks way ahead of Europe and England in terms of ease with which you can go into business for yourself. Having said that, there's no such thing as ease, it's relative. It's always incredibly difficult to go into business for yourself. And I've got the greatest admiration for people who've even succeeded moderately in business, because from my experience, where half my life was big corporates and half my life has been entrepreneurship, entrepreneurship is far more difficult than big corporate activity and maneuvering.
We're currently in a very volatile situation again. We've got some labor issues and, future growth seems to be limited. How do you think, the future over the next, year or two will pan out for smaller businesses?
I think for lots of smaller businesses, it'll pan out just fine. Because in the world, I think we're in the middle. There was the Great Depression. It was only called the Great Depression after 4 or 5 years. People didn't, when it starts, say this is the start of the Great Depression. I think we're in the middle of the Great Recession, which is a major bump for business all over the world. But I think what you've got is a combination of, we are in a recession, I think, of a considerable historic import. I think mixed into that, wealth's moving from west to east, with Africa being in the middle and more or less balancing out. But I think also what's happening is you're having older businesses starting to flounder, become less responsive. I think it's a good climate for someone who's energetic and tenacious and has got the normal sort of characteristics you need to succeed in business. The worst time for a small businessman is when everything is totally stable, because then basically the institutions and the old companies tend to hold on to their positions. It's normally in times of turbulence, such as we have at the moment, that your fledgling businesses are more likely to succeed. Having said that, there's no romance to it. 100 will start the run, well over 50 will not succeed, another 20 or 30 will only succeed moderately, but mixed into that 100 are the 10 or 15 that become the future big businesses of tomorrow.
Well, we certainly hope so. That was Kevin de Villiers. He's the CEO of Arcay. Upper Echelon was brought to you by Deloitte. For innovative thinking and thorough strategic planning, turn to Deloitte.